expecting 3 speakers. I think maybe our third speaker is running a few minutes behind, but we'll go ahead and get started. So the session title is The Role of Surveys in the Production of Official Agricultural Statistics, Now and in the Future. So as many of you know, the role of surveys for official agricultural statistics is rapidly evolving, with some countries continuing to rely primarily on surveys and those using little to no survey data at all. Most are focusing on methods to more fully capture information in alternative data sources. These efforts have the potential to increase the precision of estimates, to reduce the length of surveys, to lower sample size, and maybe eventually replace surveys one day. So in this session, representatives from the US, the European Union, and Kenya will talk to us about the evolving nature of these surveys. So our first speaker today is Linda Young. Linda Young serves as the Director of the Research and Development Division at the U.S. Department of Agriculture's National Agricultural Statistics Service. She also serves as Chief Statistician for the agency. The title of her paper is Produce Agricultural Statistics, What Does That Mean for Surveys? And please hold your questions to the end of the session. So with that said, Linda, if you would please join us at the podium. Thank you.
Mine's the other talk. Listen, yes, that would be good. Oh, okay. Okay, wait. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Barbara.
You're welcome.
This is just a reminder at the bottom of the slide that the views expressed here are my own and not that of any formal policy of the U.S. government. I'm going to talk about surveys, but in the context of our county estimates program, where we're making efforts to use all available data. So we'll discuss what data we have available, how we're integrating it through modeling just briefly, and what the impact may be for our surveys moving forward. First, let me give you a little background about the National Agricultural Statistics Service, and that's such a long name we call it NAS for short. It's one of 13 U.S. federal statistical agencies in the U.S. And the U.S. differs from most of the world in that we have a very decentralized statistics system as opposed to the centralized ones in other countries. We offer confidentiality protection through statutes that are specific to each agency. And the fact they're specific to each agency makes it difficult for us to share data across the agencies, which is a big disadvantage for the decentralized nature of our system. The NAS mission is to provide timely, accurate, and useful statistics in service to U.S. agriculture. So in fulfilling that mission, we conduct more than 100 surveys each year and produce more than 500 reports. And these reports cover every facet of U.S. agriculture: production and food supplies, prices paid and received by farmers, farm income and finances, the number of farms and land in farms, and a host of other items. As a consequence, we have a high response burden, over 100 surveys, and in many of the cases for these surveys, we need to get responses from our large producers in order to have precision, the desired precision of our estimates, because in the U.S., the production is concentrated in a small proportion of our producers. So we're going to discuss the use of all available data in the context of estimating corn yield at the county level. Now, I realize that much of the world uses the term maize instead of corn. So every time I say corn, you can think maize, and we're going to be good, okay? But in the U.S., it's corn, and I just will have trouble transitioning. This estimates at the county level are extremely important because the Agricultural Loss Coverage County Program, or ARCO, was initiated in the 2014 Farm Bill. And this is administered by USDA's Farm Service Agency. And the idea is that it ensures farmers that they get a payment if their yield falls below a specified level. So if their yield falls below a specified level, they get a payment, and if it's above, they don't. And so farmers are really interested in the estimate of the yield at the county level because that's the metric by which it's determined whether or not you get a payment. Now, to help, so corn is produced in much of the U.S., but we have the blue area there is called the speculative region. And it's where most of our production takes place. So here's where most of the production of U.S. corn in the is where we have the greatest production for corn in the U.S. We have production in corn that we try to estimate in the orange states, but we don't in New England or Nevada. And I'll be talking some about Illinois, which is a major producing state, as well as Pennsylvania, which is a more marginally producing state. But notice these 3 plain states are included, and I'll be talking about those as we go along. All right. Now, here's the challenge. In order for NASS to fulfill everything that's desired by FSA, we need estimates for all corn-producing counties in the U.S. And if you'll look, the best we're doing is about 70% over time. It's not getting any better, it's decreasing. So you'll see the percent of the estimated counties is about 70%. For sorghum, we're in the 30 to 40% range. And if you're depending on that estimate for payment, that's not, you don't think that's not good enough in many cases. The challenge is that if you'll look, those estimates are accounting for the vast majority of the production, especially for corn and soybeans, are 2 big crops. So you'll see we're accounting for over 95% of the production. Now this is strange. This is sorghum. It goes up and down, but so does the production of sorghum in the U.S. So it's particularly challenging for us to account for those. Now, in order to publish, we have a publication standard. We need at least 30 positive responses for a crop in a county. That means we have to have reports, responses to at least 30 farms saying they are growing corn, and this is how much they planted and what the yield was. Or because some counties have just a few farmers but have a lot of the land, if we account for 25% of the acreage under corn production, then we can also publish. Our challenge is that our response rates to these surveys, upon which our publication standard is based, have been decreasing. So this results in the estimates being published for a decreasing number of counties. And you can see it here. The blue are the counties for which we are doing reports. The orange are the counties for which we didn't get enough reports or don't have enough coverage to account for. And you'll see here in the plain states, South Dakota, Nebraska, and Kansas, we have a large number of counties for which we just didn't get enough data to make a report. But most of the counties, and Missouri's another one, most of the states in the Corn Belt, we do have enough data. Now, these farmers get very upset when our county estimates come out because they don't have our estimate upon which to base this, payment, the ARCO payment. In addition, in some cases, we publish at the agricultural statistics level, and that is a compilation of counties. And if we don't meet the publication standards in some, we may not be able to publish in others, because if we can publish in all but one county, by subtraction we can figure out what that county is. So we have to obscure the numbers for at least another county, and that's what the yellow represents. All right. Now, we are moving to model-based county estimates, so we don't rely so heavily on our survey estimates. We still use the Agricultural Production Survey, which is the survey that farmers report their yields, and it is the foundation upon which our publication standard is based. In addition, we use FSA, Farm Service Agency data, and from that we get the planted acreage for each of our crops, especially corn here. We also have the Rural Management Agency data, and we have from there acreage planted and harvested for each crop. And there's other information, but not in the time we need to actually produce our estimates. In addition, we have weather data, and we use an index there of growing conditions. Now, let me tell you a little bit more about the Farm Service Agency data, because it's very important to us. If a farmer wants to participate in any USDA program during a year, they must complete an FSA 578 form for that season. And in completing the form, they complete it for each common land unit. And let me show you what a common land unit is. It represents a field by the same owner, under the same crop, treated the same way. So these yellow lines show common land units. So basically it's a field. It's a field. Whoops, went the wrong direction. All right, so for each field, the farmer provides what crops planted, when it's planted, how much acreage there is in the field, and whether or not it's irrigated, other information as well. The percent of farmers growing a particular crop that come into the FSA office varies by crop and by state. There are a few errors in these data, but they tend to be relatively small because money goes out as a consequence of these forms. And so farmers make a good effort, and FSA makes a good effort to keep the error rate as low as possible. Now, let's look at how our official county estimates depend or related to our survey and our FSA data. This is for Illinois, the state I showed you kind of in the middle of the Corn Belt. And I apologize, but I just do better if I point things out as we go along. So be patient with me. Here's our official estimate. Here's a survey estimate. Over about 90% of farmers growing corn in Illinois are going to fill out that FSA form. So if you look, here we have the FSA in our county, our official estimate, and notice our estimate might be a little higher than the FSA. It's always at least as great, but because 98, 99% of our farmers participate, our estimate is really close for planted acres to the FSA number in Illinois. Our survey estimate shows the natural spread you would expect from survey data estimating that same value. Now, in Pennsylvania, a lot of the farmers, just on general principle, do not want to participate in government programs. So the participation rate of farmers growing corn in Pennsylvania is much lower than it is in Illinois. So you'll see our official estimates are really pretty close to the survey values, with some exceptions in this, but still that's close, right? Whereas you'll see our official estimates tend to be substantially larger than the FSA value as a consequence of this lower participation rate. Okay? So each state has some uniqueness associated with it. So we do these Bayesian models for county estimates, and this is a standard hierarchical Bayesian model. What's interesting about it and what has made it challenging to implement is that we have these restrictions. We have to benchmark our county estimates so that the county estimates total to the agricultural district, which are collections of counties within states, and those have to total to the state, and the state has to total to the nation. And the state and national numbers are published prior to our getting the county estimate data. So we calibrate, or we benchmark to the state and national numbers. Then the planted acreage must be at least as large as that reported by FSA or RMA. You saw that boundary in those graphs, right? FSA, the estimates are always bigger than the FSA value. That restriction is technically very challenging to implement. In addition, the harvested acreage can't be more than the planted acreage. That's obvious, right? You can't harvest more than you planted. However, doing that through estimation is challenging, especially in the rounding process. And sometimes we'll get everything satisfied, and then you round, and all of a sudden those restrictions aren't satisfied, so we have to adjust for those as well. All right, so let's see where we collect data. In the gray area, we have no samples, no observations are collected. The number of reports we have go, the 1 to 10 is the lightest, but we'll have more than 60 in some of these counties up here. All right? Look how dense Illinois is. But do you remember how close my planted acreage and FSA numbers are? Do we really need that much data from Illinois to do planted acreage? So if we look at the CVs for corn yield here, which is another, because we get the administrative data for planted acreage but not for yield. That only comes from the farmer reported data. Maybe we need the larger sample sizes for that. You'll see that in the Corn Belt, we have less than 10% CVs almost all the time, right? Right through here. Outside the Corn Belt, we still have them pretty low, but some of them are more than 30%. Here it is for planted acreage, and you'll see it looks about the same. Notice that if I look at where I have the most, the largest sample sizes that have reported, the largest number of reported data, I have the lowest CVs. That's obvious, right? Okay. Now, so the question naturally arises, should we, if we're doing all this modeling, we're borrowing information and yield across space. Do we really need a publication standard based on the survey? Because we're totally ignoring the non-survey data. We have the greatest precision in the speculative states, which is appropriate because they're the greatest producers. But could we think about taking more of the data in the states with marginal production so that we could do more publication of those counties? The publication standard for models, what should we use? Is it the precision of the the estimates. That makes sense. What should be the standard? Should it be less than 20%, less than 20 CV, 20% CV, or some other value? Often it's 30% CV for many of the statistical agencies in the U.S. Is that the standard we should adopt? And then, how can we, what should be our standard with respect to confidentiality? With the model, even if there's one report, our estimate, because we're borrowing information, is not going to be equal to that farmer's reported data. We've brought in other information to do that. So it is not the data. So could we publish with one, or should we say require at least 3 so that there's more of the perception of confidentiality is met? How important is that? Okay. So in designing the survey going forward, we're getting ready to implement the models for the 2020 crop season. Going forward, should the survey design consider the availability of non-survey data? Should we reduce the sample size in counties with high FSA participation and increase it in the states or counties with marginal corn production? Should we establish a metric for determining a sample size for integrated data? Yes, we should, but what should that metric be? And then, if we do this, is our goal to simply publish more counties or at the same time reduce the sample size? And that could lead to 2 different approaches. Now, you'll see I've raised more questions than I've answered because we're just starting down this path. I do think that our publication standard for when using integrated data needs to be reconsidered. It should not be based solely on the survey and the sample size. Survey sample sizes have been based on measures of uncertainty for survey estimates, not for integrated data estimates. And the model-based estimates using these integrated data, the survey sample design should be informed by the presence of integrated data. How to do that's an open question, or how to do it best is an open question. It requires us rethinking the traditional survey designs. And this is an exciting research opportunity that I hope several of you will be interested in and help us as we seek to solve this problem. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Linda, for a very interesting talk. In fact, I guess you've given us a lot to think about, particularly when we look at linking alternative data sources to survey data, and perhaps as model-based estimates are starting to help us move maybe away from our reliance on survey data and more towards using other sources of information. So our next speaker is Christine Wirtz. Christine is a director at Eurostat, the statistical office of the European Union. Her responsibilities include agriculture, rural development, SDG monitoring, and others. She has been working for Eurostat for 28 years and holds a master's degree in economic mathematics. So Christine's title of her paper will be Using New Information Sources for Agricultural Statistics, the European Statistical System Experience. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you for this nice introduction, Barbara.
You're welcome.
I would like to share with you what we are doing in Europe, Eurostat, together with the EU member state, on how to use new information sources for agricultural statistics. I will be structuring my talk a bit. Okay, is it fine? Yeah. So first give you some contextual information, then speak about burden and cost in agricultural statistics, which is often considered as, we are as civil servants, we always should do things with as little burden on farmers as possible, as low cost as possible for taxpayers. And I will share with you some of this and then how we expect the results. So, I already said we should do things as as little burdensome as possible. Well, we can look at what we have as agricultural statistics and see how we make it cheaper, but actually that's not the only constraint. Also, agriculture is changing, and we have to meet new data needs, whereas maybe in the past, when we started in Europe to build up agricultural statistics in the 1950s, 1960s, we were most concerned about production, of food production. Now we are asked for much more information also related to environmental aspects, how sustainable, how can we best also maintain our environment. Also, these are some of the new data needs where we would need even more data, not only, and then we are in this dilemma getting things done with as little money as possible. Then it's not only that there are new data requirements, the finances, also technology is evolving. There is new machinery, there is new tools available, things we want to eat are changing. So in all these contexts, we, together with the EU member state, we worked on a strategy on how to make things better and fit for purpose. And we have been basing our statistics production in the past on a number of regulations. So in Europe, we work so that we do regulations which are then at European level, which are then implemented in member states. And member states, the National Statistical Office actually produce the data and make them available at European level, where we then aim to have comparable data for all the countries and also have the information for Europe as a whole. And so legislation has grown over decades, starting with doing production statistics. Then there came thing, let's look at organic farming. So we had some extra legislation on organic farming, getting data maybe more from a research source, whereas others would come directly from the farmers. And all this, so, okay, let's look at the whole thing again and put things together. And all this with the not to forget, reduce cost and burden and red tape in all our work. So, again, a little bit about the context. In Europe, we have a common agricultural policy, so which is not at country level, but at European level. And there we spent about almost 60 billion euros a year all over Europe, which is a big chunk of the EU budget. One can have this. Well, it's a lot of money that is somehow spent, so we need high quality data to underpin the decision, to make sure that good decisions can be made. So, and then we had the agricultural census, which is every 10 years, so the next one is coming. And in 2010, it cost about 320 million in Europe. Well, if you look just at the 320 million, it looks like a huge number. And so do we really need that? But if you manage 60 billion, so information that needs to be based on sound data. So, we aimed then to reduce the cost for the census 2020, and we will also have some samples in 2023 and 2026, and I will come to this. So when we look at what are the drivers on the cost on burden, and how can we improve the efficiency, we looked at what is done in the global strategy for agricultural statistics at global level, and go for a modular methodology we look also at thresholds and sample sizes, frame extension on how to make it better, and then also on new data sources. And I try to focus most on these new data sources here. So a modular methodology for the agricultural census. In Europe, we had in the past, we had a census every 10 years as globally, and then in between we had intermediate surveys, which are in most countries done by samples. Some countries did them fully as census, but that was at the discretion of the country. So what we will do now, we will do in 2020 a full collection as a census of core variables, because what we want to find out with the census, we want to know the link between farmers and what they produce. So in agricultural statistics, we have this thing of, you can look at how much crop is, or corn or maize is produced in a country in Europe. But the census and the micro data of the census really look at to link directly what the farmer does with what the output is. And here we will have a census where we collect for all the farmers, which make up in total more than 98% of the population in Europe, general information so that we know who are the farmers, what is their age, what is their education, how do they manage the farm, do they work, is it a one-person show, is it a group entertaining, is it a joint management, do they have formal university training, how do they do their vocational training and all this. Also lots of information on the land, how the land is used for quite detailed the crops that are planted, the livestock, the size of the livestock. And we do a full, and we try not to use the word data collection survey anymore, but data collection, to collect data on each farm. And we will have, even in the census year, we will have modules where we collect only for samples of farms, information on, even more detailed information on the labor force, because what I said about training age, it will be for all of them. We will also have a module on rural development, on animal housing, including manure management. All this will be samples in 2020, and I will come back to the frame extension. So just to illustrate again, in 2020 we have our core data, which we collect on, as I said before, the management, the livestock, and the land, and additionally these modules. And then we also thought in the past we had more information each year. So agriculture and the structure of agriculture doesn't change dramatically every year. So we planned for the next decade when we would actually collect some of the information in order not to overload the data collection in the individual years. And so in 2023, when we will not have a census, but when we will have samples only in the countries, we will have more modules to complement the data, and then we will ask information on, we will collect data on irrigation, soil management, machinery and equipment, and also on orchards. And you see the pictures without labels are again the labor force, which we do actually in every round, and also the rural development. And then in 2026, we will collect information on vineyards, and again on the labor force, rural development, and animal housing. So we will have in 2026 one more module, but on the other hand, we try to keep the burden equal over the years. So in 2020 we have the full census, which is much more intensive. So we have this module on vineyards again in 2026. So this about the modular approach. Then still a little bit on. In the past, most of the data in the census was really collected from all the farms, and mostly via interviews, via going to the farmer, asking them with questionnaires, all the information. We will now already in the census here apply these modules, and when we have modules, we need to, of course, think about weighting, which is sample design-wise quite a challenge for some of the member states in the EU. Some of them were used to do sample surveys and sample design, weighting factors, others not yet. So now, at least by regulation, we try to really reduce so that really in all countries, not all the farmers will have to report fully all the time. And we will also, I mentioned in the beginning, our aim is to cover the agriculture 90% of the land, 90% of the livestock, of the production in the country. And we have defined thresholds. And if a country cannot meet these 98% targets with the thresholds we have defined, which means we get information of all farms which have at least 1.7 livestock units, which is a cow and a calf and a little bit more, or 5 hectares of land in general, arable land, or if you have 100, if you have much less, on growing herbs, your value output is much higher. So we have a number of thresholds in the regulation, and if with all these thresholds you still cannot meet the 98% target, the countries should do a frame extension, which means a sample, collect a sample of the very smallest farm, but there we only need a 10% sample. We don't ask really to go to every single very small farm which has maybe only 1 cow and so I think so we introduced this threshold flexibility. I mentioned the frame extension, and this will only be, the very smallest farms will only be covered in 2020 for the census. And then the next time normally when somebody would collect data from them again would be in 2030. So in between, we believe that knowing about the structure in 2020 gives us sufficient information on these smallest farms. So now I was speaking about the design, now about the data sources. So traditionally when we did the survey, we had all the possible things, computer-assisted paper interviewing, but it's all getting all the information from the farmer, going and ask them, please tell us. And we helped ourselves or the surveyors with computers, with computer-assisted web interviewing there. The farmer, of course, replies on the web, replying to surveys by post, computer-assisted telephone interviewing, or just take everything by paper, which of course needs transcoding. So now what can we use as more data sources? And okay, we are not starting from scratch in the EU. We have I mentioned the agricultural policy in the EU where farmers have to register, have to inform to get money, similar to what Linda mentioned in the US. So we have quite a large set of administrative data, but these are in Europe, in 28 countries. Every country has set them up in a different way, and we also have bigger countries where they have substructures. Again, so there is an obligation to maintain registers, to declare what you plant on each field and how many cows you have and all this, but getting a structured access and reusing this data, this is quite a challenge. Okay, we also allow now in the regulation, we allow to all kind of possible data sources, I would say. So also modeling, big data sources which come more from the private sector or from Earth observation, and I will go to this again. So just new data sources, well, one could say administrative data, we could already use them in the past, but in our past regulation there were really predefined data sources one could use. Now the regulation opens up the possibility whatever exists, even if it is not an administrative data source made for EU purposes, it can be used, and the aim is really to reduce the burden on farmers and also the cost on the statistical offices. But getting access to this data, some of these data are not necessarily in databases. They could be even kept on paper. But even if they are in a database, if you don't have a data structure so that the data can be exchanged easily, it's difficult. Also, we have land parcels in the administrative data. But to which farm does this parcel belong? There is not necessarily an identifier which makes this data linked to the farm. So in Europe, many countries are really investing, and the EU is supporting this to set up the system, to keep in a constant dialogue, to make sure that you get access to this data. And administrative data, the question is always also on when they are reported. Some of these data are, we try to reduce the burden. We try to be responsive to provide new data to the users. But the administrative data sometimes are available later than we used to be with our statistics. So we try to avoid double reporting, but we have to kind of get across this dilemma. So we really have. So we have in our regulation this very nice sentence says we have the right to have access to everything. Yes, but that's a nice, you put nice words on paper. But it requires a constant dialogue, make sure that the people who get the administrative data also make them available, and that we tell them what exactly we need, because even if they make them available, it's not necessarily usable. So a lot of work has been done in several countries, and I think we have, and you see also here in the conference some presentation by some of the EU member states that things have been done, but it's hard work. Okay, other information. So we really that's pretty new. But when we want to have all this information on impact on the environment, asking really the farmer individual question: how much manure does your cow really produce? So we would ask them to measure really. And so here we allow modeling. I mean, we have heard also yesterday there are seeds which are more productive than others. I mean, if you have all this information and if modeling can be really used, we could even at the level of the farm, we are allowing to estimate and to model some of the variables which we want to receive in the agricultural census. Then let's go to big data. And here one thing we are really looking at is Earth observation, but here we have even maybe a bigger dilemma of linking it directly to the farmer. But in a large part of agricultural statistics, which goes maybe more to the production side, this is really a good potential. So Earth observation, we can use different words: satellite images, remote sensing. I think it all means the same. So I think we have already done over the past decades a lot. Now in Europe we have the Sentinel satellites, and we are really working a lot to use this information in agriculture. Agricultural statistics has a big potential, and again there will be other presentations in the conference on this. Yes, our satellite. So then precision farming. It's again something which can help a lot also when it comes to modeling. If you have So precision farming means you have really the machines which help you to optimize the use of your land and your production. And there is a lot of data being produced, so there is a huge opportunity, but there's also a huge challenge because this started really not would say too long ago in terms of when we think about how long we have been producing agricultural statistics, but the machines know the data, but who actually owns the data? And that is a huge problem for us because it's often the machinery companies who, when you buy the machine, have in the contract that actually the data belong to the company and not even to the farmer. And maybe the farmer doesn't even have access, doesn't even see them. I mean, and maybe doesn't even care because if the algorithms in the machine do things correctly. So here also there are no standards and guidelines. So I mean, if you need interfaces to exchange data from either from the machines with the farmer or from the data holder, which may be the company in case we would get access to this data, so that again we can process this data. And here maybe one thing, it was last year in 2018, there has been an agreement at European level between the Farmers Association and the machinery companies to have an agreement on a code of conduct on how to whom that the farmers should have access to this data. So the statistics and policy was not really involved in this, but it was, and I think it's an opportunity, and we are in dialogue also with that, because I think we should use this opportunity to make the data accessible for the production of statistics. But we are there, I think, really at the beginning. Then farm management software, like this is another source, and here I think farm management software, it's in comparison to precision agriculture is more where the farmer is actively involved and uses the software to manage to enter the data in the software and directly benefits from the software. And if some of the information, if the farmer does this, if this information can be used to answer to production surveys or to data requirements for statistics, that is quite a good potential. And here we have experience in some countries, and it seems, I would say it works better if you have smaller countries with maybe one or two companies which make the software available in the language of the country. So because the language, so you have to deal only, these countries deal with one company or two companies to get the data. And there is the example, for example, of Sweden, which really uses data from software and pre-fills then the web forms on the computer to answer to questionnaires. And this is a potential which some countries use. Smart farming, this is, I just would like to mention this project where actually there are 10 different countries in Europe who are participating in a project to use all the potential that comes from digitalization. And they look, for example, at one country is looking at all the data that the machines produce, how they can use, where the machine is, the time it is active, or if you have a plot of land, you know how many, the amount of seeds that are planted, and use all this to inform statistics. But this is really at, so countries work together, share information, and we hope to benefit from this in the future for statistics. So what do we expect? We expect to have high quality statistics, maybe even higher as before, but also to provide more information, also focused on the environment, not only on agricultural production, to ensure comparability and coherence, and to all this with lower costs for the public finances and with less burden for the farmers. Okay, and next year we are doing the agricultural census, and we have this nice poster also in the lobby. So, and there is a QR code where you, if you want to know a bit more on our work, you may look at this. Thank you very much for listening.
Exciting to be getting ready for your census. We just released ours a few months ago, and we were just as excited to release it as we were to get it started.
Yeah.
But Christine, thank you for an insightful talk. I guess my walkaways is just the idea of having to meet the emerging data needs while balancing the cost and respondent burden, and really just the complications or the challenges that come with accessing administrative data, and the importance of starting to use that not only in modeling but just to try to get away from our reliance on surveys. So our third speaker, I've not actually met him. I don't think he was able to join us. So John, if you're in the house, you're here? Yes, excellent. We'll give you a couple of minutes to load your presentation then, and then we'll get started. So while we're doing that, do we have any questions for Linda or Christine? Anything that's on your mind that you'd like to ask now or before we conclude the session? Elisabetta?
Elisabetta Carfagna, University of Bologna, Italy. Now, just one point, Linda. Maybe not everybody knows the fact that official data are not derived only from survey data. So maybe not everybody in the room could catch the point about the fact that there was a very high correlation, but they are not exactly the same, right?
Okay.
I don't know if you...
Right, so...
Because official data are...
Just for clarity, Elisabetta has made the point that we have the survey data. The Farm Services Agency, or the FSA data that I kept referring to, is administrative data, not survey data. The RMA data is, again, administrative data. And then we have weather data. So we integrate, excuse me, we combine all of that information from all of those sources to produce the modeled estimates. So is that the clarity? Yeah. I'm going to get some water. Thank you. Thank you. So if there are any questions on that, I'd be happy. And as you saw, the administrative data has various availability depending on state. It's really high in Illinois, not so high in Pennsylvania. Thank you.
My name is Habtamu from the Norwegian Institute of Bioeconomic Research. One of the challenges for this data is just to get quality data from the farmers. And the more challenging is just to collect capital data, especially for machines and animal households, because it's depreciated over time. So that how do you consider this heterogeneities among the farmers in your collecting data? The question may be for both, if it's clear. There is quality differences in capital measurements in the farmers, because farmers are using different equipments and coming up with analysis and conclusion using these differences between the farmers. How do you consider these differences in the farm? Thank you.
All right, so you'd like Christine to address that?
I think both of them can answer.
Okay, and then once we'll take this question, we'll start with our next speaker. So Christine? I'm going to hold the questions for the end of the session. We're just going to allow our third speaker to go ahead and speak, but Christine will answer this question, and then we'll move on to our third speaker. We should have time for all your questions at the end, though.
This is for the analysis and also for the data collection then also on livestock over the next decade. So this is really an important data source, and so we need to know the problem and then consider it then for the production statistics. I hope this answers it. So.
Thank you, Christine. is John Gita Maburu.
Yes.
He is a statistician and leader with the National Bureau of Statistics of Kenya. You have the floor, John.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to present to you something about collection of farm gate prices through surveys in Kenya. This we have developed with my colleague, Patrick Mwaneki. I think he should be around. If he's not, maybe he's in another room. And the outline will be as follows. So you have an introduction, we'll look at the methodology, some results, discussion, and some conclusion. And I would like to say that agriculture is the mainstay of the Kenyan economy, very important. And of course, prices are a key factor here. There are many types of prices. You have farm gate prices, you have wholesale prices, retail prices, auction prices. Why I'm mentioning them is because we tend to collect all these type of prices, except farm gate prices. The wholesale prices are collected by the Ministry of Agriculture. We do collect retail prices as we monitor the Consumer Price Index, the CPI. Auction prices for some commodities like coffee and tea, we have auction prices. They are auctioned, so we have those auction prices. Of course, the world prices, these we monitor through, like for example, I have something on from the USDA, and support prices are for some commodities. You find that you have support prices. Now, why we collected or we went into collecting the farm gate prices is because we saw that one as a good opportunity to answer to these issues, because this is a data gap. We would want to do an agriculture producer price index. Currently, we don't have one. We would like to deflate the agricultural aggregates, the gross value added for agriculture, using the same, the farm gate prices, as opposed to the use of the consumer price index, for example. The issue of monitoring and evaluation of our national plans. We have the Vision 2030 is our long-term plan, and we have the medium-term plans, we call them the MTPs. We are now in the third medium-term plan. And then there is the issue of the SDGs, and also the CADIP. CADIP, for those who may know, is the Comprehensive African Agriculture Development Program, among others. And we saw an opportunity in the sense that starting this year, we had a survey. We are calling it the Continuous Household Budget Survey. So we are collecting data continuously on a monthly basis that should answer to issues of poverty and unemployment in the country, so that we have those indicators on a very regular basis. In the past, we have been doing that after every 5 years. The last time we did that was in 2015, 16, and before then was 2005 and 16. But this data is becoming very important, so we have been doing that on a more regular basis. And so we saw that as an opportunity to collect the farm gate prices, because we are going to the same households. And basically, the questionnaire that we developed for that had sections A to G. Of course, the first part has to do with the identification information, and then a section B, which has the prices for crop output. C for inputs. We also thought it's good to collect something on the purchased inputs, fertilizers, the prices that the farmers pay for inputs. And then Section D for livestock and livestock products, the prices at the farm gate. And Section E on purchased livestock input prices. And then we thought we could have for Section F and G, we look at those households that are not farming households but who buy from farming households at the farm gate, so that you are not a farmer, but you go to a farming household and buy. That can be considered is like the flip side of the farmer selling at the farm gate. And of course, when we visit those households, we want the last month preceding the interview, whether you sold at the farm gate and what commodity you sold. And the respondent here is the head of the household or any member of the household who is familiar with the marketing of the agricultural produce. Now, the sample, we have said we are only pig-riding this module in an ongoing survey. So basically, the sample has been determined for that survey, the Kenya Continuous Household Survey Program. And here, typically, you find you have these types of households. There are those households that are just crop farming households. There are those who do livestock only. And there are those who do both crops and livestock. And there are those who don't farm. And that is important. And the agriculture producer price is the price received by the farmer for their produce at the farm gate. You realize that the farmer can sell the produce at the farm gate, and typically you are talking of some middlemen coming to your home and they buy the produce. Or you even sell to your neighbor, still it will be a farm gate. But the moment you take it to the market, then it is no longer a farm gate. You will be either doing some wholesale or retail. At the wholesale, this is the price at which wholesalers sell their produce in bulk, and to retailers, manufacturers, etc. I'm saying this because the case of maize, for example, you can take it to the National Cereals and Produce Board. That's a market channel, so you don't have to really sell it on the farm. You can still take the local market, etc., etc. And that applies to many commodities like that. Here I'll be discussing the sample for the KCHSP. This is predetermined. It is using a hybrid design, a mix of cross-section and longitudinal. That's a panel, and those are the clusters involved. For the cross-section is 1,300, and the panel, we are talking of 384 clusters, bringing a total sample size of 1684 clusters, and that is 25,260. And this design is expected to provide 4 cross-sectional survey estimates per quarter each year, which can be analyzed independently to provide national, urban, and rural estimates. And in every month, we are doing 12 days of survey work. So in every quarter, we are talking of 36 days. And so this is how the panel works. For this year, you have A and B in the first quarter. So you can see in the second quarter, A gets out, then you have C coming in. In the third quarter, you remove B, so you have C and D. And then finally, you have in the first quarter, and ADC gets out. So a panel is composed of a set of clusters, each with 15 systematically selected households. In each county, a complete sample of clusters are divided into groups of, into 4 groups. That's what we have discussed, the A, B, C, and D. So in the first quarter, panel and B have just said that, how you visit them. Now, after doing that exercise, the last, we started this exercise later, or the KCHSP started in January. We started around August, because we had to negotiate to have the module being part of this exercise. And after a lot of negotiations, we were able to incorporate this module. And I take the case of maize and sorghum. One, because maize is a key commodity in Kenya, is a staple. In fact, maize is synonymous with food security in Kenya. No food, no maize and no food, they will tell you. And looking at the world price, like I said, this we got from the USDA. It translates to, that is in September 2019, you're talking of 16.3 shillings per kilogram. So what we have from the USDA is dollars per ton, so you convert them into Kenya shillings with an exchange rate and get that. So you realize that the farm gate price which we got for that month was 35 shillings per kilogram. And the wholesale price from the ministry was coming to that 7.2. Or the retail price from the consumer price index is 48 shillings. For sorghum, you see what is happening there. But of course, we are concerned about this variability when you look at the world price vis-a-vis the local prices. And you can see the same for the world price trade since August to October. And again, the farm gate price and how it compares with the retail price. At the retail level, you are talking of more than 3 times, almost, or about 3 times the world price. And I think no wonder manufacturers want to import than to buy from the local market, given this price structure. As I've noted, this data is for the period August to October. And of course, this is work in progress, but we thought it was interesting to share at this forum. Because to us, I think, and the uses that this data is for is going to be helpful to us. But we also realize and recognize the fact that whether a commodity is for own consumption or sale, and the type of market channel will affect us in terms of whether we get the farm gate price or not. If you are only producing for consumption, as it was the case for some subsistence farmers, then if you ask you at what price you sold at the farm gate, you will not have an answer for that. The same case, if you get to sell your produce, like say to the market or some other channel, and not at the farm level, then you're about to we are not about to get the farm gate price. For the tea, I've already discussed, these are excluded because they are not bought on the farm. They have to go through processing and get auctioned before you can realize the price. Prices for commodities that are grown under contract farming are included because whoever contracts you once you are contracted, the commodity is collected on the farm, and therefore that can be considered a farm gate price. We have discussed this. And in conclusion, I would like to say the APPS, which is that survey, will respond to the needs earlier pointed out, and there are significant cost savings being realized because of grading the APPS on the KCHS survey. Of course, the issue of the difference between the farm gate price and the other prices, the wholesale and the retail prices, is that they do not include profit, transport, and such like margins. Data availability, we are getting data real time because of the use of CAPI. We are using Survey Solutions software, and that has worked well. And I would like to say we just did the census and released results. We did the census this August, and we have already released the results courtesy of the CAPI, so it's doing as well. And we are happy that we are integrating the APPS with the KCHSP, because then we are talking of data integration here, which is good for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. Thank you, John. Another excellent presentation. Especially, I guess what stuck with me was the opportunity of using timely farm gate prices and indexes to reduce costs and better serve the needs of the Kenyan farmers and policymakers. So thank you, John. So that concludes the formal part of the presentations for today. We've got about, I think, 3 to 4 minutes left for questions. So I know there was someone in the back that had a question. I'm not sure if she's still here. Excellent. So if you, we'll start with you, and then we'll go from there.
Myself, Nidhi Satija, Deputy Director from Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare. Ma'am, actually, I have one question. Ma'am, Kristen was mentioning about that farm management software. So in that farm management software, farmers are providing the information. Is there any particular specific module or questionnaire given in that software in which they are providing the information? Or is it open-ended, whatever kind of farm-related information they will be providing in that? And ma'am, just adding to that, if such kind of information is provided by the farmers, whether it is used for such kind of policy making for the country, and if yes, then how this data is cross-checked with another sources provided in that data, related data. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Prachi
We'll allow
Bansal.
her to answer this one, and then you can go next. We'll allow her to answer, Christine, answer her question, and then you'll be next. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the question. Actually, I was not speaking about a specific farm management software. It was more about the general farm management software which is used, many of these softwares, and that we should think about the potential of using these softwares. So I was maybe referring to this one example in Sweden, and I can maybe elaborate a little bit more on this. So in Sweden there are these two softwares which are in the Swedish language, and actually this information is used to pre-fill the questionnaires for the farmer is pre-filled, and then actually the farmer can double check before actually submitting the answer. So it's more a help for the farmer to reduce the burden. We are not using this software to make policy, at least not in Europe.
Okay. You've got the next question, and then the last question to the gentleman in the back. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Prachi Bansal. My question is also to Christine. Christine, when you mentioned different modules for collection of data, are these different modules different for the countries, or is it one questionnaire that is canvassed across all the countries? And what about the intermittent surveys? Because one is the questionnaire for the census, but what about the intermittent surveys that happen in those 10 years across different countries in the EU?
So basically we do the same in all the countries at the same time. So the modules are the same in all countries. We will have the intermediate sample data collections in 2023 and in 2026. But again, the same modules in all the European countries. Thank you.
Gentleman in the back. In the back on the end.
Good afternoon. I'm KL Prasad. I used to be with the Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare. My question is to the last presenter. He has made an interesting presentation on farm gate prices. I was just wondering whether the intermediation margins which is available between the farm gate price and the wholesale price seems to be low for maize in your case. Does it mean that your intermediation is efficient? Has it? Do you account for the adjustment due to weight loss, or transportation costs and other incidentals which are incurred in that process of transportation and marketing?
Could you hand the microphone to the gentleman, to John, over here? So, thank you.
Like I pointed out, the wholesale prices are obtained as reported from the Ministry of Agriculture and Irrigation. And these are the figures that have been quoted as reported in the markets. So a bag of maize in a certain town is costing so much, like that. So it's an aggregation. It's like, let's say, a national average for that. So a bag of maize wholesale price was X shillings, a 90 kilogram bag. So if you divide by 90, that is what you get. So you don't calculate. And actually, that is why we didn't go into that route of trying to work backwards from the wholesale from retail to wholesale to the margins, because you are not even sure of and they vary from location to location, and again, this is a function of the infrastructure, the road infrastructure, etc., etc. So it becomes like a guesswork, and it can be very challenging. And that is why we saw this as an easier route, because you are visiting the household, you are able to know at the farm level how much are you getting. The other route is you go to the market and you determine what is the price, what price are you offering this commodity. So if you wanted to get now transport margins and the profit margins, then you'd go into asking what are the transport costs to get your produce to this at the farm, at the market level. So that would be another study.
Excellent. Thank you, John. In fact, this concludes our session for the day. I'd like to thank our speakers, Linda, Christine, and John, for most insightful, interesting presentations, and thank our support team, all of those that took care of the microphones, the cameras, in this nice facility, and for hosting us today. And lastly, but not least, to our audience for your presence and for your great questions. Our speakers will be around for the next few minutes after this session concludes if you have any questions or would like to address with them one-on-one. Again, thank you.
Excuse me. Hello. The end of the session, I would like to thank the chair of the session, ma'am, Barbara Retter, ma'am. And the lunch will serve at 12:30 at front lawn. And next session will start at 2 p.m. in this hall. Thank you.